Hi, I'm Charles, and you're watching The State of the Republic. We begin this week with the war in Syria. The United States began targeted airstrikes against Syrian government targets on Friday night, with the cooperation of the French and British governments. These strikes were made in retaliation for a reported chemical attack in Syria that many have blamed on the Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. Assad's government has reportedly engaged in chemical attacks in the past, and its most dangerous chemical weapons and chemical weapons production capability were dismantled under a U.S.-Russia broker deal under President Obama. However, since then, the regime has made efforts to regain its chemical weapons capability and has reportedly produced and used cruder chlorine gas in chemical attacks. Trump tweeted earlier this week that he was intent on striking Syria, and the French Defense Ministry confirmed that Russia was notified in advance of some intended action by NATO forces in Syria. These factors, combined with the limited nature of the strikes, have led to strong suspicions that this operation was designed for domestic political reasons, to divert public attention from the Trump administration's continuing avalanche of scandals. As evidenced by Fox News proposing that very thing Friday morning, a show known to be watched by President Trump. These strikes have failed to put a serious dent in the Syrian government's war-making capabilities, and the war has continued apace, with Syrian government forces yesterday taking the rebel-held enclave of Ghouta. These strikes have come less than a week into the tenure of former UN ambassador under George W. Bush and former Fox News commentator John Bolton as the National Security Advisor. Bolton was considered too radical and too dangerous to survive a Senate confirmation vote and hearing during the Bush administration, and only garnered the UN job through a recess appointment. Bolton's career has been marred by being wrong on nearly every major foreign policy decision the United States has made in the past 2 decades, and by a high level of hawkishness, which is in marked contrast to his own efforts to dodge the draft during the Vietnam War. Bolton, coming on the job, has already reportedly led to several resignations from the National Security Council, including a Deputy National Security Advisor, the Advisor for Homeland Security, and a spokesperson for the NSC. CIA Director Mike Pompeo also faced his first confirmation hearing before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for his nomination to be Secretary of State to replace the recently fired Rex Tillerson. Pompeo has reportedly reached out to former Secretary of State and Democratic presidential nominee for 2016, Hillary Clinton, for advice about the confirmation process. Pompeo faced questions from Democrats on the committee about his previous extremist statements, including past hawkishness and Christian dominionist extremism. Pompeo proved largely unwilling or unable to answer the questions with any level of effectiveness, and his nomination is already an uphill battle in a closely divided Senate, with one Republican senator, Rand Paul, already pledging to vote against him. Pompeo also managed to conveniently forget his links to a state-owned Chinese government fossil fuel company, failing to disclose them previously during his confirmation as CIA director. Republicans are simultaneously pushing Trump to ratchet down the possibility of an economically damaging trade war with mainland China ahead of the November elections, over concern that such a trade war would damage Republican base voters economically in rural areas enough for them to abandon the Republicans for this year's midterms. After lobbying by pro-free trade Republicans, Trump is now reportedly considering rejoining the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Obama-era trade deal that was killed in Congress by domestic opposition largely from progressive and Democratic groups. Trump campaigned against the deal during the 2016 election, and then attempted to claim credit for the deal, for killing the deal, even though the deal was already dead in Congress. And a reconsideration of joining the TPP now would truly be hypocrisy of the highest order. Trade has been one of the few areas where Trump has consistently maintained any sort of consistent policy stance. We now turn to congressional news. Congress held hearings this week on the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal, with Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg facing questioning from the House and Senate. Members of Congress proved to be somewhat bad at asking questions, as can be expected for a group of largely old and white people, with some Republicans in particular taking the opportunity to whine about supposed censorship of conservatives, censorship that is non-existent. Zuckerberg largely dodged the questions, and Congress is increasingly likely to consider passing laws to regulate massive data firms like Google and Facebook. The Senate also held oversight hearings about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, calling in its interim director, who is also the director for the Office of Management and Budget, former Republican Congressman Mick Mulvaney. Mulvaney is a Tea Party nut who took significant donations from the financial industry, particularly the payday loan industry, during his tenure in Congress. Since heading up the CFPB, Mulvaney has ceased all new enforcement actions against cheating companies and has actually rolled back at least 4 major suits the CFPB had against payday loan companies. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, for whom the CFPB is a personal brainchild, took Mulvaney to task for his disastrous tenure as interim chief, a tenure that also happens to violate federal law, which explicitly designates the CFPB's deputy chief as interim director in the event of there being no Senate-confirmed director. The Senate was also considering the nomination to the federal bench of Wendy Vitter, the spouse of the highly corrupt and consistently adulterous, now former Louisiana Senator David Vitter. Vitter was unwilling to say whether she believed that Brown v. Board of Education, the Supreme Court case striking down school segregation during the 1950s, was correctly decided. Trump also nominated to the federal bench this week a Texas attorney who dropped Texas's investigation of Trump's fraudulent university, which coincidentally had the final $25 million settlement approved by a federal judge in New York this week. Trump is predictably stacking the court with reactionaries and incompetents. Democrats are making increasingly louder calls for embattled EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt to resign from office over his anti-environment politics and his record of corruption and waste. A whistleblower from the EPA detailed Pruitt's record of lavish spending and corrupt dealings with Washington lobbyists, though most Republicans have continued to defend Pruitt. But by far, the biggest congressional news this week is the announced retirement of Speaker of the House Paul Ryan. Ryan has consistently been D.C.'s most overrated politician, with an image as a public policy wonk and with years of lavish puff pieces about this man. Despite those lavish puff pieces, he has repeatedly proven to be an incompetent, know-nothing, spineless, corrupt, and rather facetious blowhard. Most Republicans rather rapidly lined up behind the candidacy of House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy to take over as the Republican leader, with both Ryan and McCarthy's biggest rival for the job, House Majority Whip and racist white supremacist Steve Scalise, both endorsing McCarthy for the position. McCarthy is even worse than Ryan, having all of Ryan's worst characteristics combined with a truly Palin-esque ability to screw up speeches and say complete nonsense in public with the cameras rolling. The complete nutjobs in the Koch-backed House Freedom Caucus have made some noise about opposing McCarthy's bid for the speakership, which derailed his last bid for Speaker in 2015. But McCarthy has made major overtures to the far right since then, backing the appointment of a second special counsel to investigate supposed deep state abuses and Hillary Clinton, supporting a vote on the terrible and also impossible to pass idea of a balanced budget amendment, and working on efforts to renege on the previously negotiated omnibus spending deal by cutting frivolous liberal spending programs like food assistance, education funding, healthcare, and housing assistance. There was also some major state-level news this week. In the state of New York, several major labor unions, left the Progressive Working Families Party after pressure from Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo. Cuomo has been retaliating against any group supporting his primary challenger, actress and public education activist Cynthia Nixon. Cuomo has had a truly atrocious tenure as governor of New York, refusing to break the Independent Democratic Conference, a group of New York state senators elected as Democrats but who caucus with the Republicans, giving Republicans the majority and blocking progressive legislation in exchange for personal benefits which are also improper. Cuomo has largely governed like a Republican, only behaving more liberally in order to fend off primary challenges from the left and to try to bolster his candidacy for a possible run for president in 2020. Cuomo has had significant corruption problems recently, with a former top aide recently convicted in a federal corruption trial. Cynthia Nixon's campaign has a real shot, as evidenced by Cuomo's all-out effort to defeat her with the New York Democratic Party machine, including recently finally breaking the IDC, though one more Democrat needs to be brought to heel. Meanwhile, in red state America, the Oklahoma teacher strike has concluded after the state legislature passed a tax increase and a significant increase in education funding. Teachers' unions and teachers' groups have decided to take this victory, but they plan on continuing to fight the Republican-controlled state legislature and governor through the ballot box this November. Meanwhile, in Kentucky, teachers have continued to protest against pension changes and Tea Party nut governor Matt Bevin's refusal to increase education funding. Bevin has repeatedly vetoed efforts to increase education funding and has predictably behaved like a raving lunatic, stating that the teacher strike was somehow causing kids to be assaulted and raped and to take drugs. In Louisiana, the state Senate passed a law recriminalizing bestiality, which passed along a 25-10 vote, with all 10 no votes being Republicans. Make of that what you will. I don't really have comment on that. Meanwhile, in Missouri, Republican Governor Eric Greitens is facing a growing scandal. Greitens has already been under indictment for the past few weeks for allegedly blackmailing someone he was having sex with, and the scandal just got much worse. The Republican-controlled state legislative committee investigating the scandal just released a report based on the testimony of the woman involved, and it involved sordid and disturbing details, including actions that could easily be prosecuted as unlawful imprisonment and sexual assault, and possibly even rape. Greitens has predictably responded by calling the entire thing a witch hunt, despite the fact that the state attorney general, the state legislature, the state legislative committee, investigating him are all Republican-controlled, and even some Republican politicians, like the Republican governor of Illinois and the Republican attorney general and Senate candidate from Missouri, have called on him to step down. Finally, this week, we turn once again to the Mueller Russia probe. The NRA revealed this week that it had 20 Russian donors previously, up from their previous admission of 1, which was in turn changed from a complete denial about receiving foreign funds. The NRA is already reportedly under investigation by Special Counsel Mueller for illegally working with Russian emissaries to elect Trump, and possibly receiving illegal Russian donations. Special Counsel Mueller tipped off the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York, leading to a raid against Trump's lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen. Cohen's home, office, and hotel room were raided by FBI agents after the issuance of a warrant by a federal judge. Cohen is reportedly under investigation for bank fraud, campaign finance violations, and something related to taxi medallions, among other things. Trump's people are especially worried about the latest development with Cohen, because Cohen has worked with Trump in the past 4 years as his lawyer and fixer, and he apparently had a record of recording conversations regularly. Trump responded poorly to the news of the raid on Twitter, predictably once again going on a tangent and rant. Special Counsel Mueller reportedly has evidence that Cohen made a trip to Prague during the 2016 election, confirming a key detail in the Steele dossier of P-tape fame. Cohen reportedly made the trip to Prague to talk with a Russian emissary. While the meeting has not been confirmed, him in Prague apparently has been confirmed. Cohen's problems are also spreading to the Republican National Committee, as Cohen served as Deputy Finance Chair for the RNC, and this week also revealed that Cohen arranged a $1.6 million payoff to a Playboy playmate in relation to a pregnancy on behalf of a separate RNC Deputy Finance Chair. Republicans are also mounting a full-court press to discredit former FBI Director James Comey, who was fired by Trump last year, whose book is being released in a matter of days. Comey's book compares Trump to a mob boss and states that Trump was obsessed with allegations regarding the P-tape. Trump is also aiming to drum up support for firing his own personal appointee, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who oversees Special Counsel Mueller's probe, because Attorney General Sessions is supposed to be recused from the investigation. Firing Rosenstein would allow Trump to severely constrain Mueller's investigation, or even fire the special counsel. Such an effort must be opposed on all fronts in order to preserve the rule of law and democracy in this nation. Well, that does it for this week's news. Thank you for watching the program. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting content.